Let's talk about Facebook. Is Facebook an appropriate medium for B2B? What if you're not selling $9 umbrellas, but you're selling something a little bit more complicated, such as a B2B product or service, where the deal usually begins with some sort of conversation? Is Facebook right for you? Well, sitting in front of me right now is Kim Barrett. He's the founder and CEO of Your Social Voice. He's a specialist in Facebook ads, but the reason why, I was going to say Ken, after such a good introduction, Ken. Kim is part of my world because he's my go-to guy when I want to know what I should be doing on Facebook. And aside from all that, he has a silver medal in Jiu-Jitsu. What have you got the silver medal in?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So you're close.
Jiu-Jitsu. Just for fun, what does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu have to do with Facebook? Is there any overlap at all? Any convenient lessons for us?
It's a good question. There's many good lessons. So, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, BJJ for short, is probably the easiest way to allow for the pronunciation.
BJJ, thank you.
Is super relevant and super consistent, I think, with the world of business, Facebook ads, however you want to kind of draw that parallel, because within Jiu-Jitsu, there are many steps and processes to be able to get an outcome. So, for example, if I want to for probably an easy one for people to know, like a choke, like a rear naked choke, going behind someone and choking them out, right? If I wanted to do that, there's several steps that I have to do in order. I can't skip right to the end. I can't kind of try and rush things. It's almost like a game of chess where it's like I have to make a move and then there will be a counter move. And I have to be able to figure out my way to get to the endpoint that I want to get to with as least resistance possible, expending as little energy on my behalf possible as well. Because when I get there, I still got many other things to do, which is the same as business, same as Facebook ads. It's all about following a consistent process over time and adjusting, because yes, someone's going to try and punch you in the face whilst you're doing a rear naked joke, right? Someone is going to call you when you're in the middle of setting up your Facebook ads and distract you. Someone is going to block your ad account for some reason and say that you're a spammer or something like that, or is going to report you. All those things are probably going to happen, and we have to be able to adapt over time. And that's why I really like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a sport, because it is mental. It's mental and physical chess. You're moving the pieces around as you have to do with your ads, as you have to do with your business. And it's like, I think it's the Mike Tyson quote, which is quite famous, which is everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Yeah. As we do with our ads and business, same thing. It's like, cool, you get up in the morning, you're like, I'm going to crush today. And then someone calls in sick. The client wants a refund. This happens, that happens. Like it's always in an ideal world be perfect. And that's the same as jiu-jitsu. So that's just one parallel. I could go on for hours about the parallels between jiu-jitsu and martial arts, but we won't do that today. That's a different sum.
Well, I didn't expect such a tremendously apt parallel. And I never thought that I'd have someone as part of the group explaining how to choke someone out, but that's all cool. So we're talking about Facebook marketing for B2B. Now, which camera am I looking at? That one there. All right. How to book appointments when selling big ticket programs, projects, and consulting packages using Facebook. Now, you do this for a lot of people, and you've got a lot of clients, small, medium, and large at every stage of the spectrum. As I said, you help me. Let's talk about 3 things to get right if we want to be using Facebook for a B2B goal, like getting an appointment.
So there's a couple of different things. And the first one I always like to touch on is generally the one that I get asked straight away from everyone, which is, if I want to get appointments from Facebook, how much should I spend? How much should I pay? And really it's the wrong type of answer. I want to kind of break down why, and then also how to actually calculate that so that you don't go into any conversation with anyone being led down a garden path. Because if someone was able to, if you ask someone that question and they gave you an answer immediately, it's the wrong type of person to be speaking with. And there's a couple of reasons why. But if you get that right, you can hit levels of scale with your business and your ad spend that you probably didn't think possible. So for example, we've got a client who I just literally finished consulting with before this, who spends between 7 and 8K a day just in Australia, and then the same in the UK and the same in the US. So over about 40K a week in each of those locations. Now, if we didn't have these fundamentals right, like that would just be burning money, and we may as well just go chuck it on black at the casino. But the way we want to actually calculate this is we need to reverse engineer and start with the end in mind, as every good business person kind of says these days, and look at when we're having those sales conversations. So if we know our end goal is to not only get an appointment, but to get a sale, how much is that sale worth to us? And what would we be willing to spend to make that sale? Now, on top of that, there's a whole other conversation around business model, longevity, ascension, lifetime value that needs to be had as well. But ultimately, if we know what the lifetime value is of a client is our first step, then we know what we'll be willing to spend to acquire that first sale. Then we can have some fun, and then we can reverse engineer things really, really effectively. So like, I'll do this example, and we'll kind of use some round numbers to try and make it easy for us in this calculation, and more importantly, easy for me, so I don't screw up all the numbers and have to kind of divide 717 divided by 3.5 or something. So if we look at that and go, cool, let's say that we have a $1,000 initial consulting package, for example, and we know that a customer over their lifetime might be worth $10,000 to us, because when they come on for the initial consult, we have other packages, we have products, services that we can potentially offer to them. So let's say that that's our numbers, 1 and 10. So
it might be 1,000 in the first month, 10,000 over the first year.
Exactly. So it might be an ongoing consulting, mentoring, coaching, whatever that might be. So if we know that initial one is going to be worth 1,000 to us, what we've got to figure out is then how much would we be willing to spend to acquire and make that first $1,000 out, knowing that over a year it will make us 10. Now, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not going to, you've got to take into account your own taxes, all this overheads, all that sort of stuff. But for some of us, we might go, well, look, if we were a little bit crazy and we had maybe a little bit of cash in the bank, we might be like, hey, I'd pay 1,000 to make 1,000, because I know that the next month I'll make some more money. But let's say we're not at that stage yet, right? What we might go is, well, look, if I'm going to make 1,000, I'd be willing to spend 500 right now, 500 out of pocket, and I keep 500. For me, that would be a good starting point, right? So we know we're willing to spend 500. Now, if someone's good at sales, okay at sales, we can probably ascertain their conversion rate. And if you're listening to any of the other amazing people on this summit, we've got Mr. Ryan Tuckwood and things like that on there. You might be able to get some insights from him how to increase those rates. But let's just say that you were so-so at sales and you converted 1 in 5, 20%, right? So if it took us 5 calls to make 1 sale, right? Which means that we can spend $100 to get each of those calls. So if we can get an appointment for $100, we will be on track to hit our goal of making a sale for $500. Then we take the step back from that. It's cool, well, before we get an appointment, we've got to get a lead, right? And let's just say that maybe it's 1 in 10, 1 in 5. Let's go with 1 in 5 to keep it a nice, easy number as well. 1 in 5 of those leads, right, that we get and generate on the front end, we could then, at a 20% conversion rate, get to have an appointment so that then we can make our sale. Then that means that we can spend around about $20 a lead. Then the conversation becomes, cool, how many of those $1,000 sales that we were looking at the beginning over here, how many of those $1,000 sales do we want to get per month? That's how we figure out our ad spend. Again, let's say then we say, cool, we want to make 10 grand a month, 10. Awesome. Now we know exactly how many leads we have to get, exactly how many appointments we need to transition that to get those amount of sales. And now we know what our ad spend is going to be. So if we want to get 10 of those, right, and it was $20 per lead, and we said initially we worked out what our conversion rates were going to be. We now know how much we need to spend over a month. Divide that by an average of 30 days. That gives us our daily ad spend budget. Yeah. So it sounds like a bit of math, but it's good math to do, because otherwise then, if you're going to speak to someone, whether it be they're going to be helping you with generating leads, whether it be that you're running your own ads or you're getting someone to help you with ads, whatever the situation is, you go, cool, here is what my targets are. This is what my KPI is, $500 for me to make a sale, which means I can spend $20 to get a lead. Do you reckon I can get leads for $20?
Yeah.
then it's a good conversation to have.
And every business is different. So for example, it might be $1,000 in the first month for a client. Other businesses, it's $2,000 in the first month. If it's less than $500, you're probably going to start to struggle unless you want to allocate the entire amount. There are also different touch points. So for example, when you get out there and you start to do this, you've got your basic benchmarks and you might suddenly see that you're getting leads at only $10 a lead. So woohoo, this is fantastic. But then instead of it being getting a 20% conversion from a lead to a meeting, you might discover that you only get a 10% conversion to the meeting, and then you work with that. But the most important thing that Kim has pointed out here is that you need to know how much you are willing to allocate to acquire one client in the first month. And I'm going to throw something out here, Kim, and you can disagree with me because every business is different. But I believe if you're not willing to give up at least 25% of your income for that client in the first month, if you're not willing to invest that back into marketing in some capacity, you're going to struggle. And you might say, I've been doing business for 5 years, for 10 years, and I've never done that. And then Kim and I will say, how much time do you spend at networking events? How much time do you spend cold calling people? How much time do you spend doing things in inefficient ways? And it will usually work up to being more than 25% of the value. It might be 50%, might even be 75%, might be 100% of the value of a client in the first month. That's a really great place to get started, Kim. I'm actually going to put you on the spot.
Oh yeah, put me on the spot. Sorry.
A calculator for this. And if you don't, let's create one together because I think it'd be a great asset.
I do actually have one. I created one, and it's like several spreadsheets that kind of work off all of these things. So
we might have a look at that together and see whether it's worthwhile pushing it on the unsuspecting public.
Definitely.
So that's number one. First thing to get right is know your budget. And it sounds like the most important thing is knowing how much you're prepared to invest to acquire that first client.
Yeah. And if I may touch on one more point, it's like, that's what actually gives you the best ability to scale. Because for example, if you're on this summit and you're listening and watching all of these amazing interviews and trainings, it's like, I'm assuming that you want to grow your business. So if you want to grow, the goal has to be that you need to be willing to spend the most to acquire a customer, because then you can beat out all your competition. Because most people, when they're looking at their ads, especially on Facebook ads, they're looking at, oh, cool, I generated 10 leads. None of those, for my first 10 leads converted to a sale. Facebook ads don't work. I give up on the platform. Right? But if we know, it's like, cool, no, we need to spend $500 to make a sale. If we haven't spent $500 yet, we can't be asking ourselves the question about if I'm going to make a sale, because we haven't hit that limit. When you do that, and then you can actually spend more, then if there's a day where Facebook goes crazy and the ad costs go up for the per lead basis, if there's a day where it's like the elections that happened last year in the USA and ad costs are going crazy because they're spending tens of millions of dollars per day and pushing all the costs up, they won't actually impact you. Like, they'll impact you a small portion, but when you know your numbers really, really effectively, you can go, cool, I can outspend my competition. So on all those days when people turn their ads off, I leave mine on. On all those times when people turn their ads down, I turn my ads up. Like, for example, when we had all the craziness in 2020, everyone started turning their ads off, and I was like, cool.
March was amazing.
Yeah, I was like, this is going to be fun. Like, ads up. Like,
cost per lead, the cost per click, the cost per webinar rego just went. Pew.
Exactly. So I cranked everything up then. But most people, when they pull off, and they go, oh, and then they didn't know when they were going to come back on and whatnot. It's like, well, I had the opportunity too, because I know what my numbers were. So I was like, cool, these are coming in real cheap. So I was like, I'm just going to crank these budgets all the way up to the top.
Yeah. And that scale thing is right. As long as you've got the capacity to have those meetings and service the clients, you can progressively increase it. And you're right when you say the person who's willing to invest the most amount of money on that first client is usually the most likely to win, because they're outspending their competition. They're in more places. They can invest in retargeting and all the other bells and whistles too. So if number one is budgeting, what's our number two of the three most important things to get right?
Number two is knowing how you're going to acquire that lead, not customer, but lead. Because again, everyone then goes onto Facebook and everyone's going to give you a different strategy. like in all honesty, there's no one size fits all, but there's a one strategy chucked out by every single person that they say will fit all. So it's very confusing for people in the B2B space, because someone's like, cool, you have to run a webinar. Someone's like, cool, you have to do a micro VSL. You have to do a 2-step funnel, like a lead magnet to an application, or you have to grow your group. Like everyone will give you a different strategy. I always like to look at and try and ascertain, like, what do you do best? And what are you best at, and what conveys you the best to your prospective customers? So for example, if you're an amazing person at creating and curating content, and you write stuff that gets people really engaged, you might go down the avenue of a group where you can drive people into your group, you can provide amazing content, and then once a week you can be like, hey, do you want to work with me? Yes, no, right? If you're really good on video, webinars, VSLs will work really effectively for you. Again, if you're not necessarily a huge fan of video, you might go for more of a lead magnet. I call it a 2-step funnel, which is where you have a download, and then on the next page is where you have something as a call to action to get them to book an appointment directly into your calendar. So the big thing that I think most people gloss over and push through is that they'll just go out and hear someone talking about, like at the moment, there's like 5 or 10 guys going super aggressive, telling people that Facebook groups are the only sort of funnels that you should run and they're the best and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, yes and no. Yes, if you're amazing at putting great content in and keeping consistent and doing things really well.
And you
no,
also,
if you're not.
And you also need a laser targeted audience when it comes to a group. You need to know it needs to be the group for this type of people tackling this particular issue. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So I can see why different strategies are going to work for different people. You also said VSL, and I know there's a bunch of people that when you said that, what did he say? What's a VSL? Just quickly, what's a VSL?
Can't tell you a secret stuff. No, so video sales letter. So that's why I mentioned, like, if you are someone who's good on camera, and now one structure and strategy that is being shared quite broadly these days is they call it either a mini webinar, or we call it at YSV a micro VSL, which is like, rather than having the traditional 20, 30 minute plus sales letter, which is essentially what a webinar is as well, is a 45-minute plus sales letter, right? Overcoming 90-minute. Yeah. If you're like, I don't have enough time I can't focus for
I do 90-minute
45 minutes.
I love the 90-minute ones.
Yeah. But that's because you're good at it, right? It's like, if I did that, I would suck. And then we'd get to 90 minutes and I'd be like,
you're pretty good.
I forgot to talk about my product. I should have done that. just solving problems. But the shorter version, because there's always a portion of people that want to take action now, that want the solution to their problem. Like for me, the thing that I dislike the most when I go onto people's ads and webinars and funnels, and I buy things all the time, I go through people's stuff and to say, for something that I can see the need of that I need and want, I will get, is like, cool. How can I get there fastest? It's like, oh, cool. Kim, you've got to go through this, then you've got to go for a 16-page application, then you've got to do this. I just messaged him and be like, hey, I want to give you money. The outcome that you have sounds good. How can I get that? And that's really what a micro VSL will do, is say it's 10, 12 minutes. It sells what you've got to the people that are ready for it. There are people that are not ready for it, and they need to go through the 45-minute, the 90-minute webinars. They need that indoctrination time to really buy into you, your process, and what you do. But on the flip side, there's a person with a shorter attention span that needs that action also. So I believe that all of them have parts to play. And in an ideal world, you would do all of them. However, for anyone, I call it an advertising cycle. It's like, you need to identify at the very beginning your conversion mechanism, i.e. what's going to get you the leads, appointments, and sales. Then you go into a list building strategy, which is, how do I get as many people into my world as possible? Then you go into a content marketing strategy, or I like to call it the mogul method, which is like, positions you as the mogul in your industry over time. But you can't do that. You can't go and put out all this amazing content if you don't have money, right? If you don't have cash in the bank. And that's what I kind of dislike about some people in the marketing industry and world. They're like, oh, just put out amazing content every day. It's like, yeah, cool. But I can't go to the bank and be like, oh, please, sir, here's 10,000 video views for my mortgage repayment. Like that doesn't work. It's like, we're still going to have a way to make money and bring people into our world. So that's why I always recommend every strategy that you hear, if people were showcasing it, they've got case studies and results, they probably work, but choose one. And I always say, just focus on one and disregard, like unsubscribe from everything else. Don't listen to another strategy until you get that one working. If you're good on video, like James just said, like a webinar, 90-minute one, or if you're short attention span, go for a shorter one too, that can work. If you're someone who's really good at putting together great content, maybe focus on a group. And if you're someone who's really good at like just writing and articulating what you do, go for like a lead magnet download. And then on the next page, write a beautiful letter about why they should come and speak to you and jump on a phone call with you. Choose one of those.
So that last one, we didn't talk about much. And I know that that one is probably one of the most popular among a lot of the people in our world. I think Kim just explained it very, very neatly and succinctly there. We don't need to go into it anymore, but it's simply you create a gift. Someone opts in to get that gift because you've created an item of content that's of high perceived value to your target audience. It goes to a second page, and the second page explains to them why they might benefit from booking a little bit of time with you. And that's how you get the appointment. So the options that Kim went through are the group, a VSL or a webinar. There's the two-step, which is content and the other thing. You didn't mention a fourth, but I am going to mention a fourth because I'd like to get your opinion on it. And a lot of people are talking about this one at the moment. And that's the SLOW, the self-liquidating offer. Can you explain what that is and just put that in context?
I'm more of a fast man myself. I'm not really a slow man. No. So as you mentioned, the self-liquidating is amazing. Works great. I run it myself as well. However, it's not something that you should do until you know all your numbers. Hence why it's something I was going to just give you a little sprinkle of, a little Salt Bay taste of, is it's something to think about once you have all those numbers down pat. So the context, and like me give you a little bit of a contract around that to wrap that up in a neat little package, is that can work once you've got your numbers and great, I speak to X people, X, Y, Z, I'm willing to spend this amount of money to get a lead. It becomes a slightly different conversation when you talk about how much am I willing to spend to get a buyer. Now, the benefit when you do something like a self-liquidating offer or a SLOW is that ideally the money that you get from them purchasing your thing should cover the ad spend cost. It liquidates itself. So you don't have to worry if you make a sale or not, you acquire them. Now, again,
most of these things are usually $7, $37, $97, and some upsells and some downsells, and
sub $100, sub $50 on the very front end, I believe is a very good price. Now, if you can apply the same structure and strategy and thought process as we covered in that very first point, which is how much am I willing to spend? If you can then, as I said, this is where you can then start to really outperform your competition, is if you know that you're willing to spend $20 to get a lead, but let's just say if I can get a buyer to self-liquidate and it cost me $20 for them to give me $20, I can then actually spend $40 because I have that original $20 I was willing to spend anyway, right? On top of the $20 that they pay me, because I get that back, I'm still only out of pocket $20. So I can actually spend more, test more, be slightly more aggressive on running my ads than anyone else, because they're all trying to get it to be like, I want to make, most people when they go into that, I want to make money here. And it's like, no. It's the same process as we're acquiring people into our world, but we're acquiring buyers. Any argument would be verified in the fact that it's like slightly more committed because they've already taken their credit card out of their wallet, typed in their card details and transacted with us, rather than someone who's just opted in for something. So if we can get them at neutral cost or the same price as we're getting a lead for, we should be getting a better quality of person that we can have a conversation with. And worst case, even if they're not yet, hopefully the thing that you sell them does actually good work and does help them. And that allows them to go and implement and then come back to you after they've done that. And then they should be even more qualified again.
So to bring this into the bigger picture and also the summit, there's actually 4 options there. And I'm going to ask you to also introduce a 5th option. But the group, Facebook group, I think we've got 1 or 2 people as part of the summit that either specialize in groups or are very good at groups. But unlike the people that Kim's talking about, they're not. Groups are the only way. They know that groups are usually part of a broader rounded strategy. A VSL is where you put together a video or you invite people to register for a webinar. There's 2 options there, a 10-minute video, and at the end of it, you say, book a call with me. Another one is a longer thing, book the webinar. The third is the 2-step, opt in to get something else, opt in to get the thing, then you're redirected to the booking page. And we also talked about SLOWs, self-liquidating offers. That's where you're selling something. And it's a really qualified lead. It's a highly qualified lead because they've dropped some money in your bank account to get a little bit of information about what it is that you do. As Kim said, it's an advanced strategy. You've got to be able to already bundle up your information into your knowledge or expertise into something that somebody else can buy. But it's either self-liquidating, it can become break even, it can become even a profit center. But in most cases, it just means that you can spend more money to get the people into your world and outbid your competition. I did say that there was a fifth one. What about just running an ad saying, book a time with me?
Again, that can work. I won't say that it can't. It definitely can. Normally though, and this kind of is a beautiful segue into the last point I wanted to talk about anyway, which is around audiences. So that works with someone that is hot. They've been like, cool, I've been watching this James guy for a while. He's so handsome and rugged. He has amazing hats. Like I have to, he's hot stuff, right? So I have to talk to him, right? So you can go and grab those sorts of people, definitely, right? You can do that as well if your offer is ridiculously irresistible. It's like, cool, I'm going to pay you $1,000 to become a client of me. Do you want in? It's like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, sure. Like that, you can run it. Like, let's jump on and have a call. Those things where it's like either ridiculously irresistible or you have a very, very warm audience, you can go straight for that. So if you're someone who, as I said, maybe you've been doing great content for some time and maybe you've been writing great stuff for some time, but you haven't really ever put an offer out to those people, that is absolutely a perfect thing to do, is to catch those people. Most business owners, not only in B2B, but B2C, kind of everywhere, is they don't make enough offers. And they go, oh, wow, like, why aren't I making enough sales? It's like, cool, how many offers have you put out there? And they're like, well, I don't want to be salesy. I don't want to be one of those sales guys, right?
Bother everyone by trying to solve their problems.
Exactly. It's like, oh, yeah, I don't want to change their lives for the better. Gosh, who am I to do that? Right. But it's like people don't do that enough. And I get asked, and every now and again, you'll probably see if you follow me around, every kind of like 90 days, I smash offers like Instagram, Facebook, I'll post things on LinkedIn, emails, like I'll smash offers out for what we're doing because I've done like a bit of value provision and I realized, and it happens to me all the time, like, oh, I haven't like asked people to buy stuff from me for some time. And then I'll go and put an offer like that. I was like, hey, let's jump on the phone with my team or myself. Let's help you out. Here's the problem we can solve. Here's all the people we've already solved that problem for. How awesome are they? Let's go. And then we'll get a bunch of stuff. It's just not something that you can run ongoingly because then you've got to go back and like build your well back up before you start pulling all the water out. Yeah,
I remember when we started to run those sorts of ads for the first time, I'm like, this is easy. Everybody's booking time with me. And then it stopped. And that was pretty much all the people that I built the trust with that had the problem and they needed the solution that I offered right now. So in that particular context, if we're talking about the direct offer, hey, book an appointment with me, we're about to talk about audiences, but I'm guessing that that's a better strategy for retargeting to existing audiences rather than reaching out to cold audiences.
Correct. I mean, look, you can do it if you structure the ad correctly. Now, when I say that, there's a strategy that I use and like I have yet to see it fail, right? Touch wood. I have yet to see it fail. And it quite consistently makes very good sums of money. And something I've developed over time called the beta test post. Now I've tied it in with like stuff from old school direct response guys like Robert Collier with a favor letter. And there's several different elements that I use to kind of pull this together. But if you do an ad like that, it does call out to people to book a time with you and it can be run evergreen. That is the only kind of asterisk. Because if someone hears me talk about that and somewhere else, you guys will be like, but you said, Kim, that you can't do that. So I just want to give you that. There is a way to do it, but it just has to be the strongest offer that you've kind of ever created. When I say offer, it's like you've got to be really pre-selling them and persuading them on all the reasons why you're going to be amazing for them, all the problems you can help them solve. And you kind of frame it in a way that it's like doing you a favor, as in me, the advertiser, like you as the person opting in are going to do me a favor by having a call with me. So it builds in the law of reciprocity as well. So there's a whole heap of elements there, but so it can be done if your offer, as I mentioned, if your offer is fire, if it's like people are like, I need that, I want that, like I have to have that, you can run that and you can run it potentially like long term. But if it's just like, hey, I want to help you with a call, then that's like warm audience only, run for like a couple of weeks every 90 days or so, that can work very well.
Yeah, we have a training program where we talk about how to get appointments. One of the first things that you need to do is reframe the appointment as a product. So you're not saying, hey, let's catch up and explore ways that I can take your money. You're saying you need to be able to book this thing, and this thing is amazing, and it's set up as a product. What I'm going to do before I ask you to answer the third thing to get right is I am going to put these in order of complexity or simplicity. You did say group, VSL, two-step, slow, and direct offer. And what I would say is that I think Kim said it actually comes down to your strength. If you're great at videos, do videos. But my observation, and this is just me, and Kim might have a different opinion, and if you can reach out to Kim sometime, speak to one of his crew, please do. I have found, in my opinion, that the two-step is usually the easiest place to get started. You create a piece of content, you redirect them to an offer where they can book an appointment. You get the lead at the front end, which means that you've got multiple bites of the cherry. So you've got their email address now. You can bring them across the line. I don't know, Kim, agree, disagree?
Well, I would say if you had the hot audience, that warm ad that's the absolute simplest. Next step would definitely be that two-step. It's the easiest and fastest to validate, because the worst thing, again, that I see people do a lot is they're like, cool, I'm good on video. James and Kim said I should do a webinar. I'm going to do a webinar, spend all this time writing a script, recording it, editing it, putting it in there, running ads to it, and gets crickets. All these people watch it and nothing happens. And it's that's why I like to do a few other things first, is always to validate that. So even if we were to give you guys 3 steps to do right on this one step of our 3 parts, number 1, run a warm ad, getting that warm audience. Number 2, after you speak to all those people and you make some sales, you know what their problem is, create a piece of content that solves one of their problems, run some ads to it, make sure that all the cold audience, all the general people, the gen pop on Facebook like it, and some of them will book a call with you. Use the data you get from that to then go and create that webinar that you can expand upon and extrapolate upon, because you've also just got all these other people over here, results. So that's how I would do it, to kind of mitigate some of your time risk, which is really all you're risking in any of these strategies, rather than just going, hey, I'm going to go and record an epic webinar when I haven't necessarily validated that the marketplace is aware that that problem is a problem for them.
I love conversations like this, because I made an assumption with the two-step being the best first step. And then the moment that you began speaking, I went, you know what? I began with the direct offer. That's how I began. And then I went to the two-step. Then we went to webinars. Then we went to the group, creating the Facebook group. Then we moved on to the self-liquidating offer. So it's not a bad order to go in. So we've talked about budgeting. We've talked about strategy and structure. And we actually talked about 5 different types of campaigns there, which is really exciting in the small amount of time that we have together. What's the third most important thing that we need to get right?
The third is definitely your audience, or your niche, or your niche if you're from America, right? Is getting that down pat, because especially at the moment, if you speak to anyone from Facebook themselves, let's just say you got one of these emails and they're like, oh, Facebook marketing expert wants to help you. And it's like, yeah, cool. They're not really a marketing expert. It's like, cool, you have marketing in your email address and suddenly you're an expert, right? So they will go and tell you, the only thing you need to worry about is your copy and your creative. We want you to give Facebook the broad spectrum approach. We want you to open up. Don't put any interest targeting. Do male and female, the entirety of the US or Australia, and don't worry about age range either. Call people out with your copy and your creative, which can work. And don't get me wrong, I understand why they say that, because it's the best kind of broad brushstroke for everyone. But it's also that. And
if you've got a budget, but you do have to have a budget to be able to run the ads to everyone. We call it the carpet bomb. And you choose a demographic region, like the state that you live in or the city, and you go, and you run the ads to everyone. But you've got to have quite a significant budget for then Facebook to be able to isolate the people within that audience and begin to educate itself.
100%. You've got to have really thousands to tens of thousands, sometimes per week, to spend to allow for that strategy to open up. So if you're not doing that, which most of us that are general everyday businesses aren't really spending that huge scale, you need to be able to niche down and identify the right audience before you go and push it out. Now, the reason why I also like to mention niche a lot is because it's currently being quite variable. It's changing a fair bit, and people aren't necessarily building the audiences that they should to take advantage of that in the long run because of iOS 14, because of Google is going to be blocking some of their browser-based stuff. A whole heap of changes are coming. So to me, the more that you can do to build these audiences up earlier and have some quick wins, which then basically correlate to you getting more wins in the back end, is the best way to go about it. So the biggest thing that I see people not do is take advantages of audiences they have already built, whether that be on their Facebook page, on their Instagram page, on their email database, visitors to their website. Normally, if you're a B2B business that has been running, I'm going to say probably for more than a year at least, one of those four you would be strong in. You would have already been getting leads somehow, or maybe, or even to say LinkedIn or something like that as well.
Run those again. You said of those four. What were those four? So
Facebook page, Instagram page, website, email database.
Yeah.
And we can even throw like LinkedIn as an example in there as well. If you were someone who built on there, it's like one of those, if you've been running a business for a year or more, you would have, one of them would be a front runner for you. Where you're like, cool, I get quite a few views on my website, or I get quite a few people on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be. So I would be taking those audiences and using them to build the lookalike audiences that Facebook is very good at, which is identifying and matching up the points of data. So let's just say, for example, I was really good with my website and I got a lot of organic inquiry, 2-3 inquiries a week that eventually became customers. What I could say to Facebook is go, hey, Facebook, of everyone that comes and visits my website, there's a whole bunch of data on them on the internet, over 1 million points of information that kind of match up and make them who they are. Please find me another portion of the population that matches most closely and looks like them, right? Please find me them and then give me that as an audience. So it can be anywhere from 1 to 10% of the general population, 1 million and change in the US, 180K and change in Australia, to be able to generate and build those audiences. And the smaller, again, it might sound counterintuitive, but the smaller the match, the better. The bigger the number, like i.e. 10%, it's not like it matches 10% of the population, it expands it out to 10%. Mm-hmm. So it's actually less targeted. So you want like a 1% or a 2% audience. Now, by using that first of all is going to be a great piece of information. It's a whole heap of data collated together for you, being like, hey, I've got some epic people here in a bunch. Now, on top of that, right, then you can layer things like your demographic, your location, your psychographics, your interests, that do they run a Facebook page, all that other normal ancillary information you would have. So you have something that's laser targeted. Now, the reason why you can take advantage of this now, because a lot of times these custom audiences will potentially be dropping down in their effectiveness. So the more you can do it now and take advantage of it, the better, is because then as soon as you start running those ads on Facebook, they become, and people engage with it, they become people who have engaged with your page. They go and watch a video on your page. They become people who have watched a video on your page on Instagram or Facebook, which means we are now building up on site, on Facebook audiences that cannot change.
So I'm going to
take
this right back a step, because I think that if people are brand new to Facebook, they might not understand one or two simple features of Facebook. Kim talked about 5 audiences, and I'm just going to bring it back to 2. One would be your web traffic and one would be your email database. Facebook will allow you to upload your email database to Facebook and run ads to those people. That's fine. That's really cool. We talked about a direct offer before. Those people are hot. But you can also upload that list to Facebook and say, hey, Facebook, I've only got 1,200 people in my list or 2,000 people in my list. Facebook, can you find 1.6 million people that are a lot like these people? And that's what Kim means when he says creating a lookalike audience. The same deal as if you put a piece of pixel, a little bit of code on your website. Facebook tracks the number of the types of people that have been to your website. And once again, you can hit those people with ads, which is retargeting, or you can say to Facebook, hey, those 1,200 people that visited my website over the last 30 days, can you create an audience for me? I think for a small country like Australia, 1% of the country is about 160,000. And a larger country like America, it's something like 2.6 million is their 1%. Is that about right?
1 and 2 mil, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So suddenly you can go out to these different people, and that allows you to open up these strategies. I will give you one more example for the people at home that might be brand new to this, just looking at Kim and me. And this is a real example that somebody gave me. They said, imagine that you go to an event and you're presenting to 100 people in a room, and at the end of the presentation, 2 people come up and buy from you. And you're going, I can't understand. Those people seem to me like they have nothing in common. Facebook would look at it and they go, they're 2 blokes from Australia with red tinged beards. And they are the common things that they have together, which means that they bought from us. That was a bad analogy. It worked out all right in my head before I opened my mouth. But anyway, you continue. So we were talking about audiences.
And as you say, like, because there is so much data that we don't even know is given, that's why Facebook is so good at what they do. So they might also be like, oh, cool. But also, we wouldn't know this because I would never ask. But Kim and James both bank with Commonwealth Bank. They both fly on Virgin Australia. They both go to this website. They both watch this YouTube channel. They both do blah, blah, blah. And they put all this information together, which makes it super strong and powerful. So the problem with what is coming to this whole industry of online advertising is that things that happen on your website, like James mentioned, if you put that little bit of code to track people, many of the ways that happens is going to change because people have been doing bad things with other people's data. You watch any of the Netflix documentaries, you'll pick that up pretty quick, right? And because that's been happening, what they decided to do is go, hey, we don't want that to happen anymore. We're going to stop you bad internet people from tracking us and seeing what's going on and whatnot. So things are going to change. They haven't changed yet, right? As of recording this, these big changes haven't happened. So, if you're on a platform, so if you're on Facebook and you're watching videos, you've agreed that we can see that what you do on Facebook. You maybe haven't agreed about what happens off Facebook. So you want to try and funnel those people, even though they're on Facebook already, you want to funnel them towards you so that you can go, hey, these types of people, all these guys with red beards, right, that are interested in my stuff, I want them to bring them towards me and my brand. So they start interacting, they start looking at my Facebook page, they like my ad. Because as soon as they do that, they move from someone who might look like those people that came and visited my website to someone who is actually someone who is interested in what I have on Facebook. They come into a different audience, which means I can control that audience. I can send other ads to that audience. So even if Facebook goes, iOS 14, Apple, Google, Safari, Firefox, all those browsers go and block everything that we do. If I now have those people on Facebook that have interacted with me, that I know because I used all the powerful stuff I had before with my email list, my website, and build those audiences up. Now I have them as an audience on Facebook that can't be taken away from me by any of these other platforms. So it's very important to do these sorts of things now when you can leverage still some of those older strategies that have been around for a few years now that will work effectively and they'll work for you now. But then as soon as those changes happen and your audience size drops to 100 people instead of 1,200 that have visited your website because people turned off their tracking, or when they go to match your database with Facebook and you're uploading them, they don't match the email address because that person's had removed their email address from being able to be matched. You alleviate all of those problems by starting to engage them on Facebook, Instagram, etc., so that when these changes do happen, you've got an audience of people that are already interacting with you and that can't be taken away.
And incidentally, I mean, like that's basically what Facebook advertising looked like about 5 years ago anyway. They were only tracking people's behavior on Facebook. And it was still pretty amazingly targeted back then as well too. So number one is budgeting. Great piece of advice there. How much are you willing to invest to acquire one customer? Once you know that, we call that the magic number, by the way. In our business, we call that the magic number. And that's because once you know that, you can figure out everything around it. Number two, strategy and structure. And in the short amount of time, we actually talked about 5 different strategies to book those appointments. We talked about the direct offer, book an appointment with purpose with me. Number 2, there was a 2-step offer, opt in, and then redirect to an appointment page. There was the 3rd, watch my video, register to watch my video or register to attend my webinar. Number 4, we talked about Facebook groups. Number 5, we talked about self-liquidating offers. The 3rd thing that we talked about getting right is audiences. And Kim said, go narrow. And he said, the best way to go narrow is to leverage the audiences that you already have. One thing that I do want to know, Kim, is if we leverage the audiences that we already have, so these are ones we know that we have, they've been to our website, they're on our email database, whatever it's going to be. But then we've also got lookalike audiences. How do we, when we tie this back to our strategies, in which situations are we most likely to use the different audiences? So the direct retargeting and the lookalikes.
So the direct you would really use only with that hot offer, right? Only with that really warm, like, hey, you want to come and do something with me? Like, you would use it there. And the reason as well is because the audience size is generally quite small, which means that if you try and do that on a thing where you're spending $100 a day, it's going to chew through your budget and not get you much result. Right. So you really want to use something like that, where it's like, these are my warm people that I've been providing content with. So they now become hot. Like, they're the ones that you want to send that initial offer to. Then lookalikes, pretty much for everything else, is a very, very, very important starting point. I would always start with that. And then I would move to my cold audiences, which is really using my demographic, my psychographic data, my interest targeting to go and figure out how I can find those best people. But that's how I would always start with lookalikes. If I can, for something that's like kind of that two-step onwards, I would always start with that.
Excellent. Now we're going to go away sometime, Kim and I, and we're going to put our coconuts together and come up with some sort of one-page simple Excel spreadsheet. But until then, I do know that, Kim, you do have an amazing document which helps people plan out their ads. And with your permission, I'd like to put a link under this video. Is that all right?
Absolutely fine. I'd be more than happy to share that with people.
Absolutely. And I hope that when anyone downloads that, immediately it redirects them to a page where they can book some time with Kim or register for a webinar or join his Facebook group. Who knows? But after that, there'll be something awesome. Take advantage of that offer. Thank you so much, Kim. This has been awesome.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having on. And guys, if you're listening, hope you're loving the summit, and please go and apply these things. Don't just listen to us all. Take it and put it out into the ethers and make stuff happen.
And I can't believe how much we covered in that short period of time. Thank you, Kim.
Cheers.